This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Lando Norris took the dub at the 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix. A surprise result given he dropped down to P5 on the first lap and only recovered to P4 in that first stint. Yet he gambled on a one-stop strategy alternative to his teammate Oscar Piastri's two-stop, a decision that ended up pivotal. But how did McLaren allow this to happen? Is it an example of favouritism? Because Oscar was understandably frustrated post-race. Had the team advantaged his teammate on purpose? Or is that just sometimes the way it goes? Why is it sometimes good to be not so good? Well, my name's Tomo. Let's talk about it. The biggest mistake across the grid going into this 2025 Hungarian Grand Prix was the willingness to write off the viability of a one-stop entirely, right? Pirelli had 4 strategies they were recommending going into this weekend, and 3 of them were two-stops. But then we remembered that the Hungaroring is a bit of a nightmare to overtake around, in Formula 1 anyway. And it was estimated you needed an 8/10 delta to the car ahead of you to be able to make a move, which around one of the shortest laps on the F1 calendar. 8/10 is not acceptable, and it very much demonstrates the problem in F1 right now. Yes, the field spread is insanely close over a lap. That Q3 delta between pole position and Hadjar in P10 was 5.5 tenths of a second, the closest field spread ever. But then come the race, Fernando's running a DRS train. Max gets stuck behind and finishes P9 in the end. Even his turn 7 heroics hit and a couple of moves done was not enough to massively impact his result, because he went for the two-stop, and the two-stop was clearly the wrong strategy in the end. Benefit of hindsight. Oscar and George both two-stopped and finished both behind Lando Norris, who they were ahead of in the first stint. I would add Charles into that mixture as well, because of course he was running in the lead, but then his car broke for various reasons that are quite mysterious and we don't really know for sure. Is it chassis? Is it tyre pressures? I mean, George Russell loves to stir the pot, which is part of the reason I love him. George is great entertainment, I don't care what you say. He's hilarious. Like I say with Max, Alonso, Bortoleto, Stroll and Lawson all finished ahead of him and all one-stopped, all made it work. Even with all the sophisticated simulation tools that these F1 teams had, they all thought the 2 was the way to go. In the end, 11 of the 20 cars, if we're including Ollie Behrman before he broke down, were running the one-stop, so most teams did adjust and adapt, knowing that, oh, hang on a second, the one-stop is viable. But even then, going back to the suggestions from Pirelli, that one-stop they did suggest only said the median would go from lap 26 to 31. That was the pit window. And yes, Lando did stop on lap 31, but Stroll went to 36, Alonso went to 39, and Bortoleto and Lawson pushed their medium tyres to lap 40, way more than Pirelli predicted beforehand. The deg just wasn't as high as they expected it to be. And again, this is numerous factors. This is the tarmac itself, this is the ambient temperature, this is the track temperature, wind plays a factor. At the end of the day, the teams got it wrong, and the drivers that could afford to gamble, it paid off for them. Right, we're doubling up this ad read because, as you can see, I'm adorned with TOMMO'S racing goods, the cap and the t-shirt now on sale. 15 quid for the cap, 25 quid for the t-shirt, presented in a custom bag. Look at that, with swing tags, lovely jubbly. Head to TOMMO'sRacingGoods.com if you want to pick one up. My website designed and built in today's video sponsor, Squarespace. That's right, Squarespace is the all-in-one e-commerce platform I use to sell my merch. And prior to my YouTube days, I had my portfolio on. You can run a blog on there. Whatever business you run, whatever hobby you want to create a beautiful online home for, Squarespace is the perfect place to start. I've been using Squarespace since 2018 in some way, shape or form, and it has come on leaps and bounds over the years. With the latest being their Blueprint AI software that makes it an absolute breeze with a few prompts to build something gorgeous, lovely jubbly. 24/7 customer support as well to help you out if you need it. And best of all, it's free to try. Give it a go. If you don't like it, you don't have to crack on. But I reckon you will. And if you do want to put your finished website live to the world, that's the time to head to squarespace.com/TommoF1 to get 10% off your very first website or domain. Gamble is the key question, right? Because as the race started, Oscar P2, Lando P3, things went very differently for the 2 of them, didn't they? Oscar held position behind Charles Leclerc. Lando maybe being a little bit too risk averse on the inside. He knows he can't crash into his teammate, which is fair enough, but he broke very early, gave George Russell and Fernando Alonso the chance to get past him early doors. Now, it didn't take long for Lando to get back past Fernando. However, George was a wall that he could not penetrate during that first stint. That's a weird way of putting it. I'm keeping it in, whatever. He was running down in P4, Leclerc, Piastri, Russell, Norris. Wasn't looking good for Lando. And from Piastri's point of view, it's all eyes on Leclerc. It's all eyes on that P1 position, which gives you 7 more points than P2, right? So you try the undercut, you try and get ahead of the Ferrari driver. I'm sure if Oscar had known Charles' race was going to fall apart as insanely as it did, maybe he wouldn't have had so much focus, but he could never have known that. So as all the simulations had suggested prior, with Ferrari and Charles, Oscar and McLaren, George and Mercedes, they went for the 2 stops. And Lando, look, in that position, why not gamble? Will Joseph says to him on the radio, do you fancy doing 40 laps on the hard? You up for it? And it's like, why not? Because if you copy Oscar's strategy, you are guaranteeing pretty much you finish behind him unless he makes a mistake. If you try something different, you open it up to, what? Potential safety car, potential cheap pit stop. You give your teammate, your championship rival, something to think about. And you can absolutely guarantee if the roles were reversed, they would have given the same option to Oscar Piastri, and Oscar probably would have gone for it because he was offered the 1 stop. But again, there's no reason at the time why Oscar would have gone for it, because it wasn't clear at that time that the 1 stop was actually viable. When you're the driver ahead, you're not likely to take the same gambles as you are the driver behind, and that is the kind of key topic, I guess, within this video that I want to talk about. Sometimes it does pay dividends to be behind. Now, credit to McLaren, because they're not only allowing their drivers to race this season, and yes, the Constructors' Championship, they're about 1 billion points ahead of Ferrari in P2, so they don't have to worry about that. Drivers' Championship is going to be one of them. We know this, so they might as well let their drivers fight, and there's no good reason not to, because it is so in the bag. However, they are doing it slightly different to Mercedes in the Hamilton-Rosberg era. You know, Toto was very strict on, you're going to get the same strategy, there's going to be no strategic advantage either way. That's the kind of level playing field Mercedes wanted to bring, whereas at McLaren, they want to allow Tom Stallard, Will Joseph, you know, the performance engineers on both sides as well, to, you know, support their driver and have it as a proper little ding-dong, a proper little head-to-head, and I really rate it. It would be an incredibly naive way to go about it if Max was up there, if Charles was up there, if George was up there, but they're just not. So they can afford to have fun with it. You give us as fans a competitive title fight, potentially an iconic one if it comes down to the end, which would be memorable for years to come if it's a Piastri-Norris fight right at the death. Come on, that would be box office, of course it would. And also in this position, you can very much be, look, lads, you are getting the exact same treatment. Sometimes luck is going to favour one of you, but at the end of the day, you and your performance engineer and your race engineer, you hold up your end of the bargain. You fight for yourself, Lando, you fight for yourself, Oscar. But don't come to us saying, oh, the other driver's getting preferential treatment, blah, blah, blah. I don't buy that excuse at all. I think they are doing it straight down the line because they can. Why slightly preference one way or the other? You're only going to demoralise, you're only going to wind up, you're only going to annoy him, and maybe make that driver on the receiving end a bit more volatile. Just go at it, lads. Don't crash. Oscar did almost lock up into the back of Lando. That was very, very, very close. Probably will happen at some point, but it's fine because they're still miles clear in the Constructors and they're still going to win the Drivers' Championship anyway. And I know there's still going to be some people out there who are like, no, McLaren are advantaging Lando. It's bias against Oscar. Look, let me give a really good example of this phenomenon. I've got a couple actually. Let's wind the clock back 3 years to the 2022 Japanese Grand Prix. Do you remember that one? It was one of them that rained, and Sebastian Vettel lined up P9. He is the protagonist of our story. Made a strong start off the line, got alongside Fernando Alonso's Alpine in P7 off the line, but then kind of pulled back in, contact into turn 1. He got spun out, not much he could have done. It was a shame, it was unfortunate, and he was at the back of the grid. Albon was off, Joe had a spin, and then Carlos Sainz hit the barriers hard. Now, this was that weekend where they had the tractor on the track and Gasly went past it going very quick, and it was very sketchy, and there were some very unhappy drivers afterwards. The race did get red flagged. Once the race was ready to restart, it was behind safety car and everyone was mandated to start on the wet tyre, the blue tyre that never gets used, right? Everyone was told you have to use this tyre at the start to help displace more water and just give a bit more security and insurance that drivers wouldn't aquaplane. So you're mandated to do the restart on the wet tyre, but there's nothing saying you can't put on the Inter early doors. And because Sebastian Vettel had fallen back from P9 to P16, He gambled. He went early onto the intermediates, which is probably a decision he wouldn't have made if he was still running in the top 10. If he'd have got up to, you know, P8, P7 off the start, would he have banked so early on the inters? I don't think he would have. But you're at the back of the field. What's there to lose? You might as well give it a go. You're well outside the points anyway. Seb comes in for inters, so did Latifi as well. He benefited from this big time. Shout out Nicholas. And, well, he was P16. By the time every wet weather runner had put a set of intermediates on their car, he'd gained 10 positions and was running P6. A P6 he would hold on to just after Fernando Alonso caught him at the end, and they went neck and neck over the start finish line. Absolutely iconic moment, a clutch result from Seb that probably wouldn't have been so good if he hadn't spun out on the first corner. And then what about George Russell at Spa last year? That's a much more recent example. He had a so-so start, running P5 early doors, whereas his teammate Lewis Hamilton took the lead from Charles Leclerc on lap 5. George then opted to pit onto the hards on lap 11 of 44, Lewis coming in 1 lap later, and the intention was absolutely for both cars to come in again before the race finished. By mid-race, and once the first pit lane cycle had gone through, Lewis was still leading the Grand Prix, George now in P4. Off of the podium and not looking likely to catch Piastri, Leclerc and Hamilton ahead. Not on the same strategy anyway, because George, as a habit of this, he decided to go for something different. Come lap 26 of 44, Charles Leclerc pitted, elevating George Russell to P3, and that was the first mention we got on the radio of George saying, think about the one stop. And on the broadcast, literally within seconds of hearing that radio, Lewis Hamilton peeled into the pits to do his second pit stop. That elevated George to P2. Oscar was still running 5 seconds ahead of George though, and then the Australian came into pit on lap 30 of 44, which meant George Russell was leading the race on his old hard tyres, 7.5 seconds ahead of Lewis Hamilton behind on fresh ones. Lewis was reeling George in pretty quick at the start. The gap was down to 4.5 seconds by lap 36 of 44, and it was down to 1.5 by lap 39 of 44. However, then it took another couple of laps for Lewis to get within George's DRS, lap 41 of 44. And just like Oscar on Sunday, once you get into that turbulent air, it's not quite so easy. That's where you need that big delta. And Lewis didn't have enough. The one stopping teammate took the victory. Yes, I know George got disqualified for a technical infringement, I understand, but the point is still true. George had a much worse start than his teammate, gambled on the one stop to try something, a one stop that no one expected would pay off beforehand. His teammate got very, very close to overtaking him right at the end, but didn't quite have enough delta to get it done. Replace George with Lando and it is literally a carbon copy. And sometimes that's just the way it is. And look, for the title fight, I'm glad Lando won. It's 9 points now, the gap between the two of them. I want to see this go to Abu Dhabi. I want to see this go to the finale. We've got a bit of time off now. Lando will have enjoyed that one. Oscar won't be fuming for too long, I'm sure. He's got that mentality in him. I think he'll get over it. He'll understand that he was the quicker driver this weekend. He was the quicker driver in Silverstone. I think over the course of the year he has been the quicker driver more often. He deserves a lead in the championship, a bigger lead, but he doesn't have it, and that's where Lando still has a chance now to have a strong end to the season if he can learn from these mistakes. He didn't put a foot wrong at the end of the day. Oscar on the quicker tyres was harrying him down. Lando didn't make the mistake. He didn't give Oscar the opportunity. And look, Zandvoort last year, Lando won that race by over 22 seconds ahead of Max Verstappen in his own backyard. What other examples are there of drivers making pretty crazy strategy calls that actually pay off in the end? Let me know in the comments down below. TOMMO'S Racing Goods on sale, link below. Give it a go. My name's Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.